Hi there, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. Let's grab our friends over on Twitch. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. It is the 10th of October, 10/10/24. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Oops. Shocking. Hope everybody's doing okay out there. We are, let me just brighten this up just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, been a strange couple days for old Billy, so I think we're probably going to be dependent pretty heavily on questions again tonight, as we were last time. I did, however, check election betting odds just a moment ago, and I was happy to see that. Thank you for asking about Bean. Bean is doing just fine. Thank you very much. He's a good little dude. He's getting to be an older gentleman, and glad to see Eric Blake with us, who is in Central Florida, and apparently some small island containing Eric Blake is left. It didn't seem as bad as it appeared that it might be. You know, I don't mean to minimize anything, or certainly don't minimize the casualties, but my experience watching all of these things has been not just the Florida hurricanes. We had a hurricane that came up. We had a California hurricane a couple of years ago that came up and was going to be the end of the world. And I remember when there was one 2 years ago, it was going to march right up the state of Florida and absolutely destroy everything in its path, leave nothing behind. And it's just been my experience over the course of life that things that the worst case scenario never happens. It never even really comes close to happening. Of course, best case scenario usually doesn't happen either. That's why they're kind of the outliers on the bell curve, obviously. I was extremely pleased and relieved to hear it, mind you. But once again, this time they were talking about, okay, so this is it. This is the once in a century hurricane that's going to just flatten everything. And I'm very glad to see that the damage was not nearly as severe as many people had feared it might be. So, Elon is at the my neck of the woods right now at the Warner Brothers studio showing off the Robo-Taxi. Well, good for him. So we had a solid governor down there. That certainly inspired confidence. And a little confidence in government wouldn't do any of us any harm right now. Let's have a quick look just to see this ongoing chart, which I should again reiterate. I'm not sure just what its predictive value is, but it does, without question, serve as a very interesting graph of consistency in terms of what I've been looking at over the course of the last couple of years now, not 4 years now. So Kamala got a big bump when she got when she stole the nomination, or the people who run her stole the nomination, and then that link shrank. Trump was up by 2 or so at the beginning of the debate and down by 4 at the end of it. That was a little bit of a wake-up call, and she's been holding on to a 4 or 5 point lead up until the last couple of days, and since then it's changed considerably. Wow, a little more dramatically. Right now, according to electionbettingodds.com, run by John Stossel and a guy named Maxim Lott, Donald Trump is leading at a 53.3% chance of winning. Kamala Harris has a 46.1%, so, 8 points, a little over 8 point lead. That's a big deal. 7 points, pushing 8. So I expect those numbers to continue to extend. And I'm glad again that everybody seems to be doing well in Florida. With obviously our condolences to those people who are not doing well. 60 Minutes obviously heavily altered what they released. They made the mistake of releasing the original transcript first. I saw it on Mark Dice, unedited, her response to what she would do for Israel. Then she had a chance. She went on The View, and then she said she wouldn't have changed anything. Then she got on Colbert, I think it was, and asked. Once again, they're just teeing them up for these marshmallows for her to just take a bite at. Just a here's a marshmallow on a plate, and what would you do differently, or what's going to be different about your administration? Well, I'm not Joe Biden, but I'm not Donald Trump either. Raucous applause from the pre-selected audience, and then proceeded to say nothing. And I think that no matter, I don't think it's really even paradoxical. The more softball interviews she gets, it becomes clear that she can't even handle the softball interviews. So, I think it's just even somehow deeper than that. I saw I didn't watch either of the conventions. I watched Donald Trump's acceptance speech, which I thought was really rather poor, just rambling and for an hour. And this was just days after the assassination attempt, and I thought he could have been really much more forceful out of the gate at the convention. I didn't watch Harris at all, but I did see that final, photo op that everybody gets at the end of a convention where the candidates and their wives are up there. And I just saw Waltz holding up Harris's hand. And Waltz is not a big guy, and she's even smaller. And I just looked at that image of the two of them, and I just said, these do not look like winners to me. They just don't. They don't look like a winning combination. They look like a couple of weenie losers, which is what they are, of course. But I think that's a visceral thing. I don't think that's, I don't think that's something you can really cover. And so the more she stays away from these substantive interviews, when she does do them, she's a catastrophe. When she doesn't do them, she's a catastrophe. And when she does the softball interviews, she can't even articulate those when they're just, teed up. It's how many metaphors do we want to mix here? The ball is perfectly teed up. Somebody's given her a perfect setup for a spike, and she just can't do it. And I've said this before, and I think this is the thing that concerns me the most about her is not that she looks arrogant or condescending or any of the other things that you can say about her, or even confused or out of her league. There are many times I've seen her where she looks scared, and really just looks scared. And 5708 Rivera in our Twitch stream says, I think Joe Biden is furious with Kamala. I think Jill is furious, and I think Joe is furious too. And now we get to the stage in the campaign where we've already seen one example of Joe Biden basically just trying to sabotage her campaign. Just before she went on stage at a big rally, Joe appeared mysteriously at a press conference. You could hear the gasps from the reporters when the President of the United States was seen, moving in public. Thank you, Lepko. Seen moving in public with the sign of proof of life kind of thing. And he proceeded to just go on and say, no, she's been an absolutely integral part of my administration from the beginning. Now, that could Joe be being a man who's not in full command of he's never been in full command of his faculties or his facilities or his either. Um, but um, but I know dementia from experience, and I know how mean-spirited Joe Biden has always been his whole life. And now that the dust of the thing is settled, and he realizes we're getting into the home stretch here, and he's not on the ticket. Well, thank you very much from NIKC and sending love from Croatia, Bill. Thank you. Um, I just did a geography test just for fun. Did one of these online geography quizzes, name the countries of the world, and I got exactly 50% of them. And Croatia was one of them. And you know, it wouldn't put it past him to be actually genuinely go out there and sabotage her. He's got nothing to lose. He knows he's not going to be around a lot longer. He's got his legacy as president, which is an appalling legacy, but he's proud of it. He's been told to be proud of it, and he, of course, is incapable of any self-reflection, so he's got that. He was certainly not willing to step down gracefully. The pressure on him built and built and built. Let's not forget that when he did surrender the nomination, he did it by a letter. That's not exactly, coming out. He did it by letter. Then he did a weird sort of a phone call in, and then his endorsement was not exactly ringing, and it was very, very late. So Biden's got, an axe to grind too, because Obama, who was his boss, ended up endorsing Hillary Clinton over his vice president back in 2016. So there's a certain kind of people, and they usually tend to be rather dim-witted and venal and often reach high levels of power, mostly because of their inability to forgive a snub. And he's all of those things. It's possible that he could just genuinely really, really go out to sink her. I think that would be really fun to watch. I almost did a segment about this, and I just went back to a Sopranos reference. I almost said, Uncle June shoots, Tony Soprano in the guts. Just got this demented old man who's just got this chip on his shoulder, and he just snaps and just goes out there and does it. I'd love to see it. I think that would be really, really marvelous. John says, wasn't Biden pretty much withdrawn from the primary in 2016? Yes, he was withdrawn, but he did not withdraw. You have to understand the level of narcissism, kind of inherent in virtually all of these people. I don't think J.D. Vance has it, but the rest of them, the other three do, including Donald Trump. Asa Findi says, Obama just lamented that the black community doesn't have the same level of excitement for Kamala as they did for him when he was running, adding that it seems particularly pronounced with the brothers. Yeah. Obama and his bros, suffering through the horrible nightmare experience of a black person in America as he smoked doobies and went surfing in Hawaii. So I think Dave Big Booty said he didn't even run in 2016. Well, he was the vice president. He was essentially the incumbent nominee. He was persuaded to step aside in 2016, but that doesn't mean he had to like it. And now he's been shoved aside a second time. He knows he's not going to be shoved aside a third time, be interesting to see, what happens. So I don't know. We'll see. Um, one of the real key important issues are voter registration. The Democrats are usually up, +3, +8. The Republicans were up by double digits. Certainly, there's an enthusiasm gap. Donald Trump doesn't have to bust supporters in, so this is all just the same kind of reading of the chicken entrails and the tea leaves and the other forms of divination that are employed when we get to this point in our lives and our country when the uncertainty becomes unbearable and people will listen to just about anybody, including me, just talking about why this or why that. But I listened to Victor Davis Hanson, who wasn't like we've got this in the bag, but he's feeling convinced that the numbers are going to continue to firm up for Trump, and that he thinks his margin of victory will be above the margin of chicanery. So we'll see. Also, I was just thinking, just before we started the show, we don't have any really weird sort of tailcoats on this. You remember was it 2020? Dr. Oz in 2020? And my God, it just seems like half a year ago. Herschel Walker, these other candidates. Let's go back real quick and see what they have to say about the odds of the House and the Senate. So 53.3% for Trump. They're giving the Democrats a 50% chance of holding on to the House, to 44% for the Republicans. That's surprising to me. That's very surprising to me. And then on the Senate, looks like a 76% chance, 77% chance of Republicans winning control of the Senate. I'm really a little shocked about the House, to be honest with you, especially given that margin. Yeah, they've got the Democrats up by 4 points, although they're down 5% in the last day. So they are plummeting. On October 3rd, it was a 62% chance. I just can't figure that out. When did these things... Back in July, the Republicans had a 55% chance, and then the Republicans just dove from July to late August, and then a small but then bottomed out increase. At one point we were down to 35%. I don't know what the heck happened, and it was a fairly long-term collapse. So I'm not really sure about how that plays out. But that surprises me more than any of the other numbers, to be honest with you. Let's see what happened in the last week. Dems are down 12 points in the last week. So I don't know. Again, these aren't polls. These are what other people think other people are going to do. So I just like looking at them because it's a consistent thing. If there was a really, the only polls that really matter, as my friend Brent Regan said, the only polls that matter are the ones that you buy yourself, and those seem to be considerably more solid for Trump than the published ones. That's an interesting question from Richard Burton, which I will take. Just give me 1 second here. So Election Day is right? Appears to be November 5th. So the question was, what happens if I wake? Well, the actual question was, what happens if I wake up on the 3rd? But I think it's on the 5th. Just for giggles, from Richard Burton. Think about it and give us what you're going to do if we wake up on November 3rd and Kamala has been declared president. What's the worst case scenario? People are asking about this watch. As far as I know, it's a simple Swatch watch from I got in 2010. The reason I like it so much is it's very thin and it doesn't. I've worn these, hockey pucks before, and I just wasn't much. I just don't know. I much really like them. K1 says, just follow the Vegas line. Well, that's what these election betting odds are. They consolidate from Betfair, S Markets, Predicted, Polymarket, and Kalshi. Let's see what Betfair has to say. It says it unusual to be people asking to bet from this location. "2024 winning party." That's not exactly the president. Okay, so they've got about the same numbers for presidential election winner. They've got Trump at 53.5%, Harris at 45.87%. House of Representatives is still leaning strongly to the Democrats. That's incredible. That's really quite incredible to me. The House is where you get to express your popular, where the people get to express their displeasure, as quickly as possible. And I don't know. That's just genuinely amazing to me. But yeah, here you go. You can bet on any single thing here. Let's just look at one or two of the others, just since somebody mentioned it. I've never done this before, actually. I've always just stayed here at this aggregator. Donald Trump at 54 and Harris at 51. So, I don't know. One of the questions was, would Biden resign? Would Biden make it to the end of his first term? And I was saying no the whole time. I should have put money on that, but I don't really bet, and I didn't really want to start. So, there's one more because I'm kind of hooked on these things. I haven't seen any of these before. President election winner right now for Polymarket. Trump is at 55%. Harris is at 44%. That's an 11-point lead. That is a significant lead. That's not a 2-point race margin of error thing. They do have Harris winning the popular vote by a large margin, 71%. You can bet on anything, which I think, look, I actually think that's kind of cool. I know some people have problems with gambling. That's never been a problem of mine. I've got my own custom problems that have my own portfolio. But, that's a free country. You should be able to do these kind of things. But the control of the House is rapidly closing that gap. The Democrats are in free fall, and conversely, the Republicans are looking like they're riding a rocket up. So it's getting closer and closer all the time. Anyway, that's just the situation as it exists on the 10th here. Yeah, I like that. I like those numbers, and I think they're going to get better. So back to the question here: what would I do if I wake up and find out that Kamala Harris is president? Well, first thing that enters my mind is, on some level, I'm wondering if I'm going to wake up and find it whether anybody has been declared president. If this thing goes into overtime like it did in 2020 and then like it did in Arizona in 2022, if they don't have an announcer, a solid winner called by the networks by the time we go to bed, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. East Coast time. If that's not called by then there's something fishy going on. There's no other explanation for it. That's going to be our prima facie evidence right there. If it turns out that we have a problem with this voting center, or we're not getting results from this voting center, it looks like we're going to have to wait overnight. If we hear that again, then that's when the balloon goes up. That's when it's time to realize that they're pulling it right in front of our face. If it turns out it's not even a question of how long the count takes. If it's not resolved by Tuesday night, then there's cheating going on, because there's no reason why these states cannot get these numbers in within a couple of hours of the closing of the polls. Florida, which is an extremely populous state, got it done in an hour, something like that. They just here are the results, and so that's the thing to look for. And if I start seeing any of that, I'm gonna start feeling a little sick. But I'm also gonna realize that this time people are going to keep the receipts. That there are going to be thousands of people, if not tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, who are going to be recording in real time the numbers as they come in to the voting precincts, we still have the Dominion voting machines. If this election, there is a point at which, even now, I'm not willing to commit to say there's a point at which a margin of victory that's bigger than the margin of cheating, because what I saw, this is me, not everybody agrees with this, most people do, but what I saw in 2020 was that the margin of victory was irrelevant, that the way the software was set up was that it would switch more votes the more of a lead he had, that it didn't matter how much ahead Trump was, it would just start switching votes from Trump to Biden, and it would continue to do that until Biden had a small but statistically significant lead, and then there's that. But there comes a point where we saw this in 2022. We saw places where there were more votes than registered voters. I heard today, anecdotally, that Governor Gavin Newsom, who I believe is a strong candidate for the Antichrist, I genuinely do, has said that it is against the law in California to check IDs at a voting pool location. It's against the law to check your IDs. Well, I'm voting by mail this time. I'm not that it's going to make much difference in California, but I'm voting by mail. That's a lovely thought. Lord Bio says any state that can't count its votes accurately and quickly should be demoted to territory status. Exactly right. California territory. They can sit in Congress and they can debate in Congress. They just don't get to vote until they get their house in order. Lapko says he doesn't think the Democrats ever got over Florida in 2000. There's been more shenanigans for longer than most of us realize. I just want to recount for those of you who are new to this, because this is 24 years ago, if you can believe it. Honestly, it's a quarter century ago. But Florida got its act cleaned up after 2000. The 2000 election, at the time, prior to 2020, was horrifically embarrassing for the state of Florida. So what happened in Florida in 2000 was Florida actually exists in two time zones. The peninsula is in the eastern time zone, but the panhandle is largely in the central time zone. And so after 7 p.m. Eastern, they called the state for Florida. They called the state of Florida for Gore. And the Bush campaign rang up furious and said, they're still voting in Florida, you jackasses. So they withdrew that. The Panhandle tends to go more conservative. So what ended up happening was Florida became too close to call. Now, that, to me, stay with me on this, that aspect of it seemed legitimate. That seemed like a legitimate thing, and they didn't get the answer that night. Obviously, didn't get the answer for weeks, almost months, until the Supreme Court made a decision. But in 2000, the situation in Florida, it was not like, hey, we have to delay this, or this center's not reporting. What was happening was the votes were coming in, and it was so close that they could not call it. What was discovered, I think, the next day after all of the votes had been counted and accounted for, was that George Bush had won the count. George Bush won Florida. Then the Democrats demanded a recount, which they are entitled to do. If the margin of victory is narrow enough, according to our Constitution, you are allowed to recount the votes. Well, the votes are counted in Florida mechanically. They were punch cards, and they were fed into a machine, and the machine counted the votes. So George Bush won the count, and then he won the recount. And that was the end of it as far as the law is concerned. The recount was legitimate, and the business of not being able to call Florida that night was legitimate. It was genuinely too close to count. It was an exceedingly close election in Florida. So, too close to call that night. Okay, we get the final count. Bush wins. Democrats demand a recount because he only wins by 1,000 or 2,000 votes in a state with millions of people, something like that. Okay, so we recount the votes, and Bush wins again. But that's what the law required, and that's what the law did. But the law has no meaning to these people. So the Democrats said, well, we want to examine the ballots to make sure that everybody voted the way that they wanted to vote. We don't want to deprive citizens of their most precious American heritage because they may have voted the wrong way. And there was a lot of talk about the butterfly ballot, which I think was in, I want to say in Palm Beach or West Palm Beach, where the way the thing opened up was a little, look, I saw the butterfly ballot. I had no problem with the butterfly ballot, but they said there are a lot of seniors there, and a lot of the seniors all vote Democrat, and they just announced that Palm Beach County went for Bush, and that's crazy because everybody there is a liberal, and so they started. And the Republicans let them, and the state legislature let them start examining the physical ballots. And that's when we got into a rooms full of people holding up ballots and saying, oh, this ballot, this particular piece of paper, it's one of those hole punch things. So you slide the ballot into a brace that kind of locks it in position, and you go this, and you go down the list, and it punches out a little tiny little square piece of paper, which is called a Chad. I didn't know that at the time, but by 2 days after the election, everybody knew what a Chad was. The Chads were the most prominent word in the English dictionary. And so you had people holding up these ballots. So you'd get a ballot, and it's like, well, this ballot is invalid. Why is it invalid? Well, because not all of the holes are punched. So somebody would say, well, look, there's a little dimple here. See, they tried to push it out, but apparently these poor old people didn't have the strength to do it or something. So this one is a dimpled Chad. This one's a hanging Chad where they pushed it, but not enough to break it free, so it's hanging. That's maybe a vote for Gore. Let's count that as a vote for Gore. Here's one that they didn't knock it out. It's a dimpled Chad, or if they really pushed it, it's a pregnant Chad. And they're looking at each one of these ballots, and the entire point of all this is, I didn't know it at the time, but that's where things went off the rail. That's when we should have simply stuck to our guns, but we never, ever do. This is when they come up with the big, this is a democracy argument. We go, yeah, we support our democracy. It's not a democracy. It's a republic. Let's start talking to people like they're adults. If this person didn't push that thing through, they're supposed to check their ballot when they bring it out. You're supposed to check your own ballot. And if you don't check your own ballot and you put it in there, then you have, and if you intended to vote for Gore, but you pushed on it not hard enough or whatever, and you didn't check to make sure that that little hole was out of the way, like you were supposed to, then you failed your vote. A ballot is not a vote. A ballot is an action. A ballot is a procedure. And if you are not capable of following this procedure, then you have failed your vote. Nobody forced you. Nobody forced you to not push hard enough on those things. Nobody forced you to not check your ballot. On the contrary, you were advised on the ballot and make sure that all of these things are hanging or clear and all the rest of it. But no. Steve Young said it's right. It's a process. This is a very, very, very simple set of steps. And my opinion at the time was, if you are not capable of doing this, you probably shouldn't have your vote registered anyway. You have the right to vote, but they were trying to determine people's intent, and they let this go on and on and on and on and on. And then the Democrats said, "Oh well, that's when the Supreme Court ruled. That's when the Supreme Court selected George Bush as president." The Supreme Court didn't select George Bush as president. The Supreme Court didn't say we declared George Bush as president. The Supreme Court said to the state of Florida, "You've got yourself a hell of a mess here, and we're not going to interfere in this gigantic mess that you've made. But I'll tell you this, you will have your electors with their final numbers in Washington when the actual genuine electoral count vote is held. You don't get to keep delaying until you get the numbers you want." And of course, every single time they would do this recount, they would get more Democrat votes, more box loads of Democratic votes would appear, like with the Al Franken vote. When Franken was being elected, I guess it was senator in Minnesota, they would have cars show up. "Oh, look, we found a box of ballots." "Really?" "Yep, just found them. Just from this precinct. I guess somebody misplaced them." "Oh, really? How many ballots are in there?" 7,000. "Wow. So it's a 50-50 election. It's razor thin. That's why we're doing the recount." "So how did the 7,000 votes break out in this?" "Well, all of them are for Al Franken." "Oh, really?" "Yeah, every one of them." "Well, that's kind of odd." You know what the statistical chance of that is? The statistical chance of that happening is zero. In a 50-50 election, the chance that 7,000 ballots are all going to, whatever the number was, are all going to be for Franken is zero. And again, we just let them get away with it. We just let them get away with it. We always let them get away with it. They did it in Arizona. "Oh, our counting machines are broken in this Republican county, the most populous county where the big Republican vote is. Turns out the election machines are broken. Don't worry." "Oh, well, we'll go someplace else and vote." No. Don't go someplace else and vote. It may not count if you do that. Stay here while we work on getting our voting machines back up. And don't worry, the accuracy on some of them is up to 50% now. And we just let it happen. We just let it happen. Let it happen. Kari Lake won that election, and the reason I know Kari Lake won that election is because it took them, what was it, a week and a half, something, until they finally put enough pressure on people to overturn the vote of the people of Arizona, and nobody did anything. There was a guy who was in charge of certifying the vote count for a small county in Arizona, a small county. And he said, "I'm not certifying our votes. I'm confident about our votes. I know our votes are accurate, but I'm not going to certify them because the state of Arizona requires every precinct to certify the votes. And I'm not certifying this precinct until I find out what the hell's going on in Maricopa County." It sounds to me like they don't know what the hell they're doing. It sounds like they're cheating. I'm not going to agree to certify our votes until I'm satisfied that the people who are doing my job over there are doing their job correctly. And he came back about 2-3 days later, and he says, "I am going to agree to certify these votes, but I'm going to certify them under protest. The amount of pressure and the threats that I've received and my family have received, I am not going to subject my family to credible death threats." So, yes, I think that was look, I can't speak for the guy. It wasn't my family. I think it was a cowardly thing to do. I think he should have come out and said, "I am receiving death threats, credible death threats. And I've contacted the FBI and they don't seem to be helping." And then they kill him. let's just say that you said I'm receiving credible death threats. That is your immunity, you know. If somebody ever did that to me, if anybody ever said, well, you know, you better shut up about this, Bill, or bad things are going to happen to you, we know where you live, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this public. I've just received a series of credible death threats that say if I don't shut up about this, 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 and this, then this. So if something happens to me, then you know who to go looking for. And when I say you, I don't mean the people. I mean my SEAL team and FBI friends. Because we know how to fight too. Yeah, he should have named names. I thought what he did was understandable and human, and not everybody who goes out to, you know, be a county commissioner or whatever the hell he is, made out of heroic stuff. But I thought that was a chance that was lost. So, K-Wolf says, how do you know what is credible? Well, I think if somebody calls your house and tells you, this is your address, this is your wife's name and social security number, this is where she works, this is where your kids go to school, this is what time they get there, and this is what time they leave, that I would consider to be a credible death threat, as opposed to, I'll kill you if I ever find you. And I never get those, by the way. Never. I think I might have had one vague one at one time back in the day. Kari Lake was intimidated and pushed back. Yeah, well, I don't know. There are, you know, everybody's got, you know, I don't know. I'm in the dimmest part of the public spotlight. So I often wonder, of all the things that I've done in my life, if they were to trot out evidence of all of them, would I keel over? If somebody were to say, yeah, we have recordings of the worst thing you've ever done. Not the worst thing, the worst things you've ever done. We can prove it. So you better do this or else we're going to release all those things. I've thought about this quite a bit. I think I'd just assume that they release them. In fact, if I thought it was a genuinely credible threat, I would release it myself. I would say, hey, I've just been threatened with this, 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 and this, and I wanted to just make this announcement to say that everything that they say is true. That's all true. All the things that that I just told you about that they're accusing me of, they're all true. Okay? So I'm not changing my mind. I'm not changing my opinion on this. You can think of me what you want. I know it's disappointing, and I know a lot of people. I think this is fair to say this is true for most people. I think most people have things that they've done that they are mortified by. Mortified. And I'm talking about going back 20, 30 years. I'm just saying things that they've done that they would essentially do anything for them not to be made public. But if somebody's threatened me over that, that means I've got some power over the forces that be, or else they're not going to make the threat in the first place. And I genuinely think the smartest thing to do in that case would be to simply come out and say they've accused me of this, 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 and this, and they're all true. I don't need to go into any more details than that. I'm not proud of any of these things. Needless to say, I'm ashamed about them. If you want to speculate on the reasons why I did these things, the best reason I can come up with is because I'm a failed human like so many other people out there. But nevertheless, I will tell you this, no matter how many moral failures they can document, this isn't going to be one of them. That's kind of a cool line, actually. This is not going to be a moral failure, because this one I have to live with, and I'm not going out like that. I'm just not. Do what you want. Do what you have to. I've led a good life, and you frankly could save me a lot of trouble. So, you know, there you go. Boom. So back to the Kamala Harris. What would I do if it turns out she is, wake up and find out it's Kamala Harris has been elected? Well, a lot would depend on whether it looked like whether there was evidence of election fraud or not. Um, I find it hard to believe that there wouldn't be any. If she was elected and it turned out she was elected overnight while losing in all these states in a repeat of 2020, then I would continue to fight and I'd scream bloody murder, and I would just say, as long as we continue to accept this, then they'll continue to do it. But if it turned out that she looked like she won legitimately and that there was no real tangible evidence of any, significant election fraud, let's just say she won. Let's just say she actually genuinely won. Then my position would be, okay, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Now it's time for me to step up. I've been going through an awful lot of personal things lately that I can't talk about. There's just been rough times and all across the board. And it's, that and the fact that nobody can see past the election has just got me pretty much incapacitated, at least temporarily. And that is going to change after the election, because after the election I'll know which way I need to handle spinning all these things. But to put it mildly, it's been pretty rough year, and it's hard to, and I can't really articulate why. But if that happens, then it's time to get on the hill and put the flag up there and just say, no, we're gonna fight this one. We're gonna keep fighting. We're not gonna let you get away with it twice. This time we are gonna have the receipts, though. That's the difference between this time and last time. We will have receipts that will be unimpeded. That'll be admissible in court. So that's what I think is different this time. And we'll see. But I am mailing in my ballot this time. I am going to make sure that it gets in there. I'm not going to find myself in a polling place with an 8-hour line. They've reduced the number of voting locations in each precinct, making it more and more difficult for you to vote by in person. And I honestly, for the life of me, do not remember whether I have to declare whether I'm a Republican or Democrat if I go in and vote on election day. I do not remember whether that happens or not. But I'd rather take my chance on mailing in the vote, because I come from an area, despite my little neighborhood, which is a small piece of America, stapled onto the beast of the back of Los Angeles County. I still live in a zip code that they probably don't worry too much about. Tranquility Base USA says the court has to hear the cases. They refused even to do that last time. Yeah, the Supreme Court punting on that last time was, heartbreaking and enraging. That's why we have a Supreme Court. Missed a couple super chats here, kind ones, and I just want to make sure I didn't miss another one. If I missed this one from Lapco 92, it says, I don't think the Democrats, oh no, I just said, ever got over Florida in 2000. There's been more shenanigans longer than most of us realize. And here's Lapco 92 again. For the record, the only threat I ever made was a tongue-in-cheek Clockwork Orange joke, and a joke about me doing the hammering a few weeks ago. And then very kind from Tuesday Scavenger. Sorry, things have been tough. Hang in there, Bill, and thank you for the super chat and the kind words. The kind words mean much more to me than the money, and the money means a lot to me, so thank you. I'm not living in a camper in a storage lot, but I'm shopping for them. So anyway, yeah, John Roberts is a coward. John Roberts is a narcissist, arrogant coward. I'm concerned about the reputation of my court, how future will view my court. It's not your court. You happen to be the guy who got picked when the last guy who was Chief Justice was no longer with us. Is it Rehnquist, you want to say? And so if you want to have, if you're concerned about the reputation of your court, then your court should go into the business of the Supreme Court and do it as fairly and as constitutionally as you might possibly be able to pull it off. Look, one way or another, it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be fun to see all of the, because I genuinely believe Trump is going to win the election. Even with all the cheating, I genuinely think that's what's going to happen. I think that the margins are much bigger than they appear, and I think an 8-point lead, and I think it's going to continue to increase. I think there's not going to be any way they can pull the cheating off, because they're going to have to switch every single vote in the precinct, and there are going to be people recording. We're going to have receipts this time. That's why this is not a sneak attack like last time. So yeah, that's a great point. 5708 Rivera says Roberts will have no legacy because he stands for nothing. Precisely right. Was it Marshall? It was from the South. I think it was Marshall who said when he was a young man he used to dress in white robes and scare black people. Now he dresses in black robes and scares white people. That might have been another Chief Justice Court. I actually don't remember, but I do remember the quote. Lord Bio says the Butler rally with Musk pushed him over the top. That and Harris's failure in NC and Florida. Elon Musk is an enormous asset, because Elon Musk is the future. Having Elon Musk put on a MAGA hat, a black MAGA hat, and get on stage with Donald Trump is basically saying this is the side the future's on. And this is especially great to me because the Democrats always like to say, oh, the Republicans are on the wrong side of history. It's like, no, history hasn't been made yet. The history is not predetermined, you morons. History is going to happen depending on what we do with our free will. When you say we're on the wrong side of history, you mean we're on the wrong side of progressivism, and I think progressivism went too far 50 years ago. So, okay, you know what? We'll see. I can't believe as many people got duped by Biden in 2020 as had gotten duped by him. He was always known for his stupidity and his venality. He's a mean, nasty man. Now he's a mean, nasty, demented man. And here's the thing about Joe going rogue, which I love. When you get down to brass tacks, he is legally the President of the United States of America, and no one can tell him what to do. They can deprive him of ice cream cones, and they can tell him to walk over here and stand next to the Easter Bunny, and they can do all of those things. They can keep him out of the press. They can tell him which questions to ask, which questions not to ask. They can yell at him when he makes a mistake so that he goes up there next time and he says, oh, I better ask this question because I don't want to get yelled at. How many times did he say that during his presidency? 30? I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want anybody yelling at me. It's like, dude, you're the President of the United States of America. Nobody yells at you. At least not if you were really the president. Nobody yells at you. If I'm the President of the United States, nobody's yelling at me. I'd be looking forward to enthusiastic disagreement, but you start yelling at me, it's like it's time for you to find another job, I suspect. Lord Bio says I have Democrat family in Delaware. When I told them that Biden would be the candidate in the spring of 2020, their only response was, God, I hope not. And Tim Waltz's entire family endorsed Donald Trump. Waltz was a stupid pick from a stupid woman doing something stupid. There's no way to explain it other than the fact that they're both communists, so she liked that. And the theory is that Obama picked Biden because he didn't want to be overshadowed by his VP pick. Biden picked Harris because he didn't want to be overshadowed by his VP pick, and Harris picked Waltz because she didn't want to be overshadowed by her VP pick. And this is the classic definition of small-minded people, right? One of my favorite aphorisms is A-level talent hires A-level talent, and B-level talent hires C-level talent. That's that principle in action. And there's John Eden with another 99.99 super chat. John, thank you so much. Means so much to me. Dan Craig says, why is Trump wasting his time in Coachella? I don't know. I imagine he's trying to get people at the music festival. He's going after everybody. That's smart. That's smart. You don't give... If I'm running for president, I don't give up anybody. I don't say we're going to lose New York. I don't say there's no point in campaigning in California. It's against my principles. If I run for president, I want 100% of the vote. And I want a plan for 100% of the vote. I want a plan for 100% of the vote, and I want advertising that's written specifically for 100% of the vote. And if you don't have a plan for me to get the bots, the brides of the state, the biggest single voting bloc for the Democrats, if I don't have a campaign strategy to win them, who are the least likely to vote for me, then I'm doing something wrong. I want everybody. Lady Hawk says, I like that Trump said he was thinking of renting Madison Square Garden. He should rent Madison Square Garden. He should go right to the heart of the beast in downtown Manhattan. Do it. Do it. Show it, show a sold out Madison Square Garden in the hardest of the bluest of the blue, and say this is what happens. People coming from all over the area, and none of them I had to bus in. It's booked for 10/27. Perfect. Perfect. I love it. That's great. By the way, this is a serious question. This is not a rhetorical question, and this is not a dogging on somebody question. I really mean this. If it had been Kamala Harris who'd been winged in the ear at a rally, an outdoor rally, do you think she would have dropped out of the race? I have an opinion, but I'm curious to know what people say. If they had switched places and somebody had taken a shot at Harris and nicked her in the ear, come that close, do you think she would have had the courage to continue with the race, or do you think she would have dropped out? Richard Burton says it's going to be an amazing finish, yeah. No, she would have stayed in and been canonized by the media. You think she would have stayed on board, just not gone outside again? I don't think in any way there's really for her to step down. The machine would have made it clear that's not an option. Yeah, she would have just hidden more. That would have been the last outdoor event she would have ever done. That would have been the last public event she'd ever done. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I don't, as Fiddy points out, it seems unlikely she would have stood up above her bodyguard protection and shouted, fight, 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 though. When he went back to Butler, I thought, that's just brilliant instincts. And then when he started off by saying, as I was saying, I thought, this guy, he's a showman. Yeah, everybody agrees she would continue, but the media would have made her a hero. Well, it's not sure. There's no evidence that Kamala Harris was actually hit in the ear. She may have just been hit by a fragment of the teleprompter. Like that's different. Let's see. Eric says, if Trump turns New York, the left en masse will react like Luke hearing Vader is his father. Yeah, if Trump turns New York, that'd be like Harris winning Texas. And, I don't know, come election night, it could be Yeah, Dave Big Booty is screaming. It was still a bullet that hit the teleprompter. It didn't hit the teleprompter, but that was my exact. The teleprompter didn't just explode, you know. It wasn't just like the teleprompter cracked on its own. If you got hit by a piece of a flying glass from a teleprompter, it's because the bullet smashed through the teleprompter on its way to him. Idiots. My God, I've seen more reconstructions, more detailed reconstructions of that. Computer animation of that. The first one came out early, but I've seen more detailed ones, and it's genuinely, it's just miraculous. It's just miraculous. So we'll see. Oh, the penguin exploded. I hate it when that happens. So, you know, we'll see. So if she wins, regardless whether she wins on the day after the election or if she wins, you know, 2 months after the election, then my job will be to point out, okay, the beatings will continue until morale improves. How do we keep ourselves out of this mess and this collapse? I no longer subscribe to a belief that used to run my life, and that is that things are on a inevitable perpetual decline. I believe that for most of my political life. I don't believe it anymore. I really just don't believe it. If Harris wins the election, then we're going to get more of what we've been getting until we decide we don't like it. Because we don't like it. Nobody's buying it. It's being forced on us. If people... Now you get to the point where you have to deal with the fact that Trump is his own worst enemy. I think if J.D. Vance was running as the presidential candidate and was getting the same airtime that Donald Trump was getting, I think Vance would be up by 30 points. I think he'd be up by 40 points. So if we lose, then we tough it out. And I'm certainly no more immune to emotions about these things than anybody else. I'm certainly more, I would say I'm more volatile than your average bear. Certainly more volatile than your average conservative bear. And I will not be a happy camper. But I also know from experience that when things really go south, when there's really a crisis, that's when I'm at my best. And so we'll just have a special election night live podcast. I have not been asked to go back to Daily Wire this year. I don't suppose it's technically too late for the invitation, but it's starting to look like they have got other plans. So unless I get the call to go out to Tennessee, we'll be doing a live election night coverage, and I'm sure we can rustle up Stephen Scott. Well, I don't know if we can rustle up Steve. He'll be drunk blogging the thing, but we'll just see. Go crash their party. No, thank you. There are shreds of dignity that remain somewhere underneath this tattered exterior. But we will, even if I am in Nashville and it goes one way or another, I'm just going to grab the iPhone and we'll just go live on Facebook if we have to. I'm not. I certainly don't want to carry the whole thing myself, but I don't know. It could go close the whole way. I get a feeling. I get a feeling that it's going to go. If I had to pick, just of all the potential ways that election night could go, my feeling is it's going to go the reverse of how 2012 went. 2012 Republicans at least this Republican, thought we had a good chance of winning that election. I didn't think we had it locked by any means, but I thought we were likely to win. And as the 2012 results started coming in, the things that we were supposed to be winning big were close, and the things that we were supposed to be winning close, we were losing. And that was showing up real early. That was showing up in Florida. And over the space of about an hour or two, it became clear that no, this just isn't happening. And then whenever they called whatever state they called, I suppose it was Ohio for Obama, I just put up a Facebook notice and shot back to this very chair, and we did a Stratosphere Lounge Live that had like 500 people live. And if that's what happens this time, then that, well, either way, that's what we'll do. Because it's going to be, the reason I haven't been able to proceed I haven't even been able to proceed on story mechanics because this damn election is just so big in front of all of us. And what's the things to come and all that stuff, it's going to dramatically change the way I present these issues. It's, the things to come looks very, very different with a soft landing than it does with a hard landing. There's still going to be all of those problems that I mentioned that have to be dealt with, but it's going to be different than if we're in for a worse 4 years. But that's a worse 4 years for the government. It's a worse 4 years for our foreign policy. It's a worse 4 years for our military preparedness. It's a worse 4 years for the debt. It's a worse 4 years for all of these things. This crisis is necessary. We're going to get a hard landing or a soft landing, but we're going to be in for some tough times. And everybody fears this, when they hear, oh my God, tough times. Like, tough times are not so bad. People who've been through tough times always say that the tough times were their best times. You can see this now with hurricane relief. 5807 Rivers says the space program will suffer. It will suffer. And if Trump is elected, then the government will get the hell out of Elon Musk's way, and we will start to see some real progress. That's one of the things I'm most excited about with the Trump victory, is watching the U.S. government get out of the way. My gosh, here's a super chat for $100. Thank you so much. From Tuesday's Adventure. Reading a lot on ancient Egypt lately. Writer mentions that Egypt is the only country to pull itself together from major collapse multiple times. Not to shortchange the pharaohs, but we can sure as hell best that record. I'm done with, quote, inevitable decline, unquote. I am with you, Tuesday's Avenger, and thank you so much for that super chat. That's very generous of you, and the sentiment I am beginning to share wholeheartedly. It's not like I'm going to put people down. Oh, I'm not going to hear it here. It's like, I understand it. I do. I understand. Oh, we're losing the country. We're taking tremendous beach erosion. There's no question about it. We're taking beach erosion. And it sucks. And it sucks losing the Boy Scouts, and it sucks losing Star Trek and Star Wars, and it sucks losing, the Justice Department, and it sucks all of those things. But Kamala Harris is not going to start sending out squads of guys to start coming after our guns because you can't find that many guys. So anyway, and it looks like we got a Starship launch on Sunday. A couple people are mentioning that. Yeah, somebody put pressure on somebody. The FAA had said not until late November. I would like, frankly, if they launch on Sunday and they catch that booster, then that's a Donald Trump campaign ad, right? That's a Donald Trump campaign ad. And that is just, everybody's losing their minds, going crazy. We did it. We stacked it. We're ready to fly again. Let's go. I'm Donald Trump, and I support this message. So thank you very much for that super chat. All right, let's go to questions. Why don't we here? I need to make this hot mic, I need to just commit to it being Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. I keep thinking, all right, well, I'll get on it tomorrow, and just been in a rough place, and I just need to lock myself into it. I don't miss Monday nights, I don't miss Thursday nights, and I don't miss Tuesday mornings. I occasionally have to reschedule the Mondays or the Thursdays, but we're here for these shows, and I need to be here for that, because I need to be doing I don't know if I need to be doing a daily show, but 3 times a week I need to do something regular. I've gotten emails from people who've canceled their memberships who are saying things like, Matt Walsh does a show an hour a day, and so does Clavin and Knowles, and they're right. And I'm sure I could do a show a day if I had a staff that had everything teed up for me, but I don't, and I'm not using that as an excuse, because I've just been completely discombobulated for quite a while now, and I'm looking forward to being uncombobulated. I'm really sick of this. Thank you, Eric, for curating our question session tonight. We got a Bob Knife. We got a Jacob Belchek, 2 Jacob Belcheks, an Eli Nora, Broke College student, Eric Blake, and that's it. Good. So I'm getting a little sore in the throat here. All right, so let's start with Bob. Bob Knife. I have several very conservative Facebook friends who are posting that the Democrats are changing the weather in order to impact the hurricanes in the Southeast. It seems so absurd to me on several levels, the first of which is, how could this benefit the Democrats? Me too. This whole weather machine, weather is a weapon thing, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But if anybody should be sending a string of hurricanes into the country right now, it should be the Republicans. We don't do that because nobody can do that. But the disaster relief is just yet another general vibe that the status quo is not working. The Harris-Biden administration has not covered themselves with glory in terms of the response to Helene. I think that everybody understands that the relative relatively good outcome in Florida as a result of Ron DeSantis, and I don't think they want to advertise that either. So, every time I hear this, oh my God, record floods, oh, record hurricane. It's like, it's not a record flood, it's not a record hurricane. Even if it's a human record, even if this is the biggest hurricane on human record, it's not the biggest hurricane ever. This planet has been here for 4.5 billion years. I assure you, this is not the strongest hurricane that ever hit. It's just more publicity for the ultimate lever. The climate change lever is the lever that they use to get you to do anything. They will get you to do anything. You're going to this college, you should go to this college because it has a smaller impact on the environment. When I'm booking tickets now on Expedia or on Alaska Air, I find that I can take a flight which has a lower carbon footprint. Would I like to donate $10 to reduce my carbon footprint? I say no. In fact, I'd like you to pay me an extra $10 to increase the carbon footprint. So anyway, I'm just getting so sick of hearing this whole thing. It's just ridiculous. So here we go. This has even come to the attention of Roy Spencer. You may remember as the climatologist who was a guest on Russia's show. He's refuted this and also highlighted the sensationalist headlines seen below. Your thoughts on the current conspiracy theory. By the way, we had, I don't know if it was this year or what, but we had the season, we've had a summer with the fewest hurricanes at all during the regular hurricane season. It's abnormal for what is generally considered to be postseason, but anyway, here's what Roy Spencer said. A weakened Milton made landfall at Siesta Key last evening just south of Tampa with an official max sustained wind of 120 miles an hour. I looked through the NHS reported wind measurements from NHC, reported wind measurements from airports and private weather stations, and none reached a sustained wind of 100 miles per hour. How about that? You can check the wind speed and the and direction by calling the ATIS, the Automated Terminal Information System, at any airport. In fact, I almost said any towered airport, but virtually every airport has an automated terminal information system. There's a phone number you dial, or there's a radio frequency used in the air, and you'll get a recording that is updated every hour of what the wind speed, direction, barometric pressure, dew point, visibility is for that particular location. So it's interesting. He says that they was reported to come in ashore 120, but he said he didn't see anywhere winds of 100 miles an hour. He said there were fewer the gusts just over 100. No sustained winds of 100 miles an hour. There was a report from St. Petersburg of over 5 inches of rain in 1 hour, which is impressive. All weather station sustained winds I saw in Tampa were below 60 miles an hour. That's not even a hurricane. Hurricane is 75 miles an hour of sustained winds, if I recall correctly. Several tornadoes were reported with what looked like EF1 damage, flipped cars, some roof, and some siding damage, which is pretty typical for hurricane rain bands in advance of the hurricane eye. In other words, just another hurricane coming ashore. He goes on to say, this morning's headline on Fox News, monster storm carves deadly path through Florida at this hour after striking in the dead of night. And he goes on to say, I hate storms that strike in the dead of night. I agree. It's a dastardly thing for a hurricane to do. You could see how it slowed down out there off the coast of Cancun. Once the thing hit Hurricane 5, Category 5 wind intensity, the sucker slowed way down. And it slowed way down a day in advance. And it did it specifically so that it could come tearing into the Florida peninsula in the dead of night. Bastards. Bastard hurricanes. What are they going to do next? They'll probably delay so that I guarantee you, the next major hurricane is not only going to delay to come in at the dark of night, it's going to delay long enough to wreck either Halloween, or maybe they'll be able to figure out how to wait long enough to really come in right at Thanksgiving, because that'd make a news story. We're surrounded by idiots. This country is designed by geniuses, run by idiots. The same thing can be said for television and radio. Designed by geniuses, run by idiots. Hysterical idiots who, we talked about this, I think, last show, or at least last Monday, how algorithms are designed to generate hate. You will skip past something that you're interested in, but you won't skip past something that makes you genuinely angry. Okay, hurricane. So we had 60 mile an hour winds, and we had some rain and a couple of minor tornadoes. And I saw some of these tornadoes. One of them looked like a tornado. A couple of them looked like water spouts. We used to get water spouts all the time out there. I was sailing once. I had just gotten to Key Biscayne from Miami. I didn't do any sailing in Miami, but I learned how to, Bermuda. I didn't do any sailing in Bermuda. I learned how to sail on a lake that was not much bigger than the boat I was in, just because I was bored. I had the day they had a little sunfish out on this tiny, tiny little pond. And I learned to sail on that pond in a little sunfish, is the tiniest little single-masted sailboats that you can rent. And my brother Steve and I were sailing off of Key Biscayne, and we were maybe a mile offshore, something like that, and we saw these two water spouts. So we hightailed it for the beach. And for some reason or another, we pulled the skeg up, the running board. And a sailboat will not sail without something to push against, and that something to push against is that the keel, keg. It's not the keel. It's the skeg that runs down at the bottom of the boat. Once you put that thing at an angle, it can bite into the water, and then the sails have something to push on, and you go sideways. Otherwise, you get blown with the wind. But we were out running those twin water spouts, and that got our undivided attention. But I still don't know what the worst of that would have been. I don't know if those things were strong enough to lift us out of that boat. I know it wasn't strong enough to lift both of us out of the boat. I probably would have just taken us for a little ride and just dropped us in the water, which would have been kind of cool, frankly, because we were both very good swimmers, my brother and I. So more hysteria, more gloom and doom. It's all over. Never seen anything like it before. Killer hurricanes. No more plastic bags for you. No more private jets unless you're a celebrity. And no more flying unless you're a celebrity. So become part of the elite priesthood or walk, you filthy peasants. Jacob Belchuk. Hail, Bill. Hail, Jacob. Came to major political awareness about 12 years ago. And I owe much of my fundamental political philosophy to you. Well, I apologize for that, for which I'm eternally grateful. Thank you, Jacob. That's very kind. The time seems to have been a sort of edgy libertarian phase for the right as a whole, where we are now all agreed it was impossible to legislate, where we all agreed that it was impossible to legislate morality, typically in terms of sexuality. Now that the left has run with their gender politics to the degree that they have, I don't hear nearly that much of that. I don't either. The left seems to think that they can legislate their sexual morality perfectly well, up to and including removing children from their parents' homes if they don't sufficiently affirm the child's gender identity. It seems to me that society will have a morality legislated upon it, and it can either be yours or someone else's. While I think that very few on the right at the turn of the millennium would have predicted that in 25 years we would not have consensus on what a woman was, I wonder how much of that we simply gave away. I'm starting to see movement away from this more libertarian wing of the right and towards a more rigid conservative, more rigid religious conservatism. What say you? I agree. Look, I value the Constitution because to me it is a freedom. It's a document that preserves freedom, and the more history I read, the more I realize how precious and unlikely and rare periods of human freedom are. So I like being a free person, and in fact, I love being a free person, and so I do what I can to protect it, and that's kind of why we're here. My interpretation of I don't believe I'm particularly wise at all, but I do read people and believe in people who are wise. Thomas Sowell comes to mind, and Victor Davis Hanson. When I find myself in agreement with people like that, I generally feel like I'm on the right side of an issue. But when it comes to the Constitution, I take that as I take it virtually as gospel. I take it as this is how it's supposed to be done, gang. And when I was doing the virtual presidency thing, gay marriage was quite a big issue, 2012 and 13. And I remember at the time I had to write a virtual presidency segment about that, and I said, well, here's the thing about gay marriage, folks. I've looked through the Constitution, and you know what's interesting? There's not a word about gay marriage in this document. You know what's even more interesting? Not a word about regular marriage in this document either. That's telling me that the people who studied this, many of whom were religious, some of whom were not, but the people who have studied history and studied the animal that is man, they were experts on humanity. They decided not to put this into the Constitution. They decided to put freedom of religion into the Constitution, even though the religion that granted freedom of religion was Christianity. They could have just mandated it, but they didn't. You know why they didn't do it, by the way? I've realized this now. I didn't fully realize it until just this second. But the reason Islam will kill you if you say something bad about Islam is because they don't have much confidence in Islam. The reason that the founding fathers of the United States of America could write a document that says, according to our idea of government, you can believe in Christianity and no one can take away your right to practice Christianity, but they can't take away your right to practice Islam or Judaism or Wiccan or whatever else. They basically say you get to make up your own mind. You get to be free to make up your own mind. Those are Christians speaking. And what they're basically saying is we have enough confidence in Christian virtue to believe that this is something that you have to decide for yourself, that it's not enforceable. We could say that this is a Christian country. We could legislate it. We could do it right now. Instead of the First Amendment saying of freedom to practice religion as you see fit, the First Amendment could say the state shall enforce Christianity as the law of the land. They could have done that very easily. And I'm sure a number of people probably argued for it. But they didn't. And they didn't because they had confidence in Christianity. They had confidence in their own Christianity. And I'll tell you what else they had, was they had an understanding. They had an understanding of Christianity. And what I mean by that is Islam as an example, and Judaism to a lesser degree, are religions of in the case of Islam, it's physical coercion. In the case of Judaism, it's more of a moral coercion. But there are rules that you must follow in both of those religions. And if you follow the rules, you're A-OK. And if you don't, then you don't. And these are external rules that apply to how you live your life, and don't particularly get into the internals of it. That was one of the only things Bill Maher ever said that was very funny. But I think he said he was half Catholic and half Jewish. And first time he went to confession, he said, "Forgive me, Father, I have sinned. I believe you know my attorney, Mr. Leibowitz." There is an aspect of Judaism that studies the Talmud and the Torah and tries to determine. Well, I just come out and say it. It's from the outside. As an outsider, it sometimes looks to me like they're looking for loopholes. One example of this is the dominion of the Jewish community, which has a definition, and I only know enough about this to make myself sound like an idiot. But basically, there are rules that apply to Jews that are living within this boundary that don't apply when they're not inside this boundary. And this boundary is determined by a wire. And there's a wire that goes around Los Angeles, and there's a wire that goes around New York, and this determines if it's completely nondescript. You have no way of knowing it's there. You have no way of knowing that it even exists unless somebody like me tells you about it. But if you're on one side of this wire, you're under a different set of rules than you are on the inside of this wire. Thank you. It's called an eruv. And by pushing the boundaries of this around, what they're basically saying is that God has instructed us to do certain things on the inside of this line and certain things on the outside of this line, but he didn't say where we could draw the line. And to me, that seems like looking for a loophole. There are conservative Jews who are committed to not doing any work on a Sabbath, and Ben Shapiro is one of them, and I have a very high degree of respect for Ben for this, because this is a major inconvenience. Oh, thank you. SV Greenberg says that he sent an explanation by email to me, and I hope it was sent on to you. The Eruv creates a community, defines a community, this sort of invisible wire. So it's not invisible, it's just I mean, if you know where to look for it, there it is. But when you find that like a conservative Jew or Hasidic Jew or somebody says that they've been commanded not to do any work on the Sabbath, and you find out that the interpretation means that pushing an elevator button is considered work, and then you find out that some people say, okay, well, if that's work, then we'll use a stick. This to me seems to be missing the point. I heard a discussion of somebody who was saying that that there is an injunction in Judaism that says you should not, essentially says you should not take a blade to your, male shall not take a blade to their face. And so, okay. But somebody somewhere said, well, an electric razor is not really a blade. So as long as we're not shaving with a blade, we're home free. And to me, that sounds like, well, that just sounds like I don't know. I have a problem with this. I may not be understanding it correctly. I may be presenting it completely erroneously. I certainly hope I'm not doing that. Um, but but it's like if God says, "Do not take a blade to your face," He's basically saying, "I want all Jewish men to wear beards." And if you say, "Well, it's not really a blade," or we'll put nair on or something like that because I'd rather be clean shaven, doesn't that isn't that saying, "Looks like I got God on this one, huh? Outsmarted him"? I don't know. That just seems to be the case. But back to the main point I was trying to make about freedom of religion. The essence of Christianity is that this is all inside. This is not external. These are not commandments. Um, uh, S.B. Greenberg said, God said the people of the majority make the rules. Okay, that's that's fine with me. I don't know enough about it to be less than an inflammatory idiot. But 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 my point is, I don't think it's nitpicking. The point I'm trying to make is it's not trying to nitpick, and I'm certainly not trying to pile on Jews. My history of defense of Jewish people in Israel has got me a tree planted in Israel, and I'm very proud of that. Um, but what I'm trying to say is that in Islam it's enforced by violence. There are committees of vice that go around, and if you're holding hands or listening to music or kissing, or if a woman's hair is visible or whatever, they're beaten severely, and then if they do it again, then they're stoned to death, that kind of thing. That's man enforcing the laws of God. Um, the the thing I'm trying to get at is that according to Christian theory, you can follow all the rules you want to, but what matters is what is in your heart. You can obey all the rules and still not be, well, I was almost going to say not be worthy of heaven, but nobody's worthy of heaven. So so that's kind of the essence of of that freedom is a belief that it's up to you. It's not up to us. Um, so back to the question about the religious right that used to exist in the 80s um, and the question of gay marriage and so on. So my feeling, based on what I understand of Christianity, is it's an internal conversation that you have with your Savior and your conscience, or to the degree that they're separate things, and you don't get to cheat after hours. So my feeling on this is that I have no business telling homosexuals what to do with their lives. It's not up to me. The Constitution specifically leaves it out, other than to say that you are free to practice a religion or no religion. Okay, so Christians can say it's a sin, but it's not mandated as a Christian country. I'm not saying that you shouldn't defend that position. On the contrary, I think we could use a little more defending of the idea of sin in this society of ours, defending the idea that sin is real and that it's something to be taken care of. But my position on gay marriage was always like, it's frankly none of my business. It's none of the government's business. In fact, the government should have nothing to do with any kind of marriage, let alone gay marriage. Then you start finding out things like marriage licenses and all of the government things you need to do to be married and divorced are relatively new inventions, and many of them came in the South after Reconstruction. And this idea that you needed a marriage license was basically introduced by Southern racists to make sure that black men couldn't marry white women or vice versa. That it was designed to prevent concatenation, which was the mixing of the races. So you had to get a license from the government to get married. That's a religious ceremony. Ultimately, it's a contract, and the government shouldn't have anything to do with that, in my opinion. I don't think you should have to have a marriage license. I think marriage does have to be a legal status. I think there has to be there has to be a difference between being married and shacking up. But to get permission from the government or to get a license from the government is just, I just don't think it's any of the government's business. And apparently, unless I'm missing something, the founders didn't think so either. Eric Blake says, Jefferson said, if it doesn't break my bones or pick my pocket, what is it to me? That's the essence of real conservatism, of libertarian conservatism, is it's none of my business. So I have no problem with homosexuals. I've been surrounded by homosexuals pretty much my entire life. I started working at the Players Theater in Miami when I was 15. I started working at the Planetarium when I was 14. This theater company took over the Museum of Science Auditorium as their playhouse, and when they were backstage, they were outside in Miami in the rain, and I would be back there with umbrellas. I was 15 years old. I was fascinated by this. I just loved the theater. I was an usher. I just sat and watched all these plays. And like any other theater department, there were large numbers of gay people there. Never thought twice about it. None of them ever gave me any trouble, and I thought they were all kind and interesting and actually extremely funny and interesting and hilarious. And did I mention interesting? So I don't have any problem with it. I understood why people defended the term marriage. I think that is an argument. I think there's a solid argument to say, well, marriage is a man and a woman. That's what marriage is. You can have the same rights, but you can't call it marriage because marriage is a husband and a wife, a man and a woman. The definitional argument I believe in, but the right to that legal status is not my business. Of course they have the right to that legal status, in my opinion. But that ship has sailed. So far so good. So no problem. But what happens is that progressivism is not progressivism and liberalism, Marxism, all of these socialist collectivist ideals are not capable of functioning in isolation. I think this is one of the most important things I've ever said. Really ought to take a moment to say that again. Collectivism of any kind is not capable of functioning as a subset of other political ideas. It has to control everything. That's what it is. That's what it's got evangelists that make Christians look like pikers. You will conform to what the state says, and we will force you to do it, or else we'll put you in jail. We'll come in with guns and they'll take you to jail. If you resist them, they'll shoot you dead. That's what collectivism is. And since that collectivism requires everybody to think the same way, they proselytize. And what they are proselytizing for now is not just gay rights. In fact, some of the strongest allies that conservatives have on the trans issue are gay people. They are acutely, as a general rule, acutely embarrassed by this trans lunacy. They know that it makes the gay community look bad. It's really got nothing to do with the gay community. It's got to do with a small group of mentally ill people who have a perfect right to be mentally ill. If you think you're a cat and you want to stay at home and be a cow and your pronouns are pers and piz, that's fine with me. I don't care. It's none of my business. But you don't get to make me change the language for you. And if you want to get upset because I call you she instead of jizz, that's just too bad for you. I didn't do it out of malice. At least I didn't in the beginning. Now I'm starting to do it out of malice because of the obnoxiousness of the level of indoctrination. These teachers are determined not just to present homosexuality as an alternative viewpoint. That is an argument to be made when kids are older. You could probably start having that discussion around the time they're 15 or 16, not when they're 6. Because you can't talk about homosexuality and you can't talk about homosexuality, period, without talking about sexuality. And I don't want that in my schools. I don't want that in front of third graders. In the same way that I don't want a third grader to come in and say, "Hey, good morning, class. How's everybody going? Listen, before we get to the math this morning, I got to tell you something. Sheila and I last night, Sheila, my girlfriend, I've been telling you about her an awful lot. Well, we went out last night and I just banged the living daylights out of that broad. I'll tell you what. I mean, she was just screaming so loud I thought they were going to call the cops. Pretty cool, huh? What do you think? Do you think I did a good job? Yay for Mr. Whittle, hooray, hooray. No, you heard that, you'd have my ass out of the street fired, and as it should be. It's got nothing to do with what you're teaching. Stop your agenda. Get those flags down. There's one flag that belongs in a classroom, and it's the flag of the United States of America, because that's something we all are. We're not all gay, We know we want you to be. I mean, we know you want us to be. You put a gay flag up in the front of the room, you're basically saying that this is the dominant philosophy and ruling theology, essentially, of what this class. This class is subject to the laws of the gay agenda. You put a flag up there. Well, a lot of people like the gay agenda, and a lot of people don't like the gay agenda. But we're not all gay. In fact, most of us aren't. But we are all Americans. That's why the flag needs to be there. And if you have a problem with that, then you're in the wrong country, and you're certainly in the wrong job. So, yes, we have had to become less hands-off about this. Not because we got meaner, but because this was a classic case of give somebody an inch, they'll take a mile. It's like, okay, congratulations, you won the social argument. You certainly, in my opinion, you certainly have the legal rights that married people have. And if you've determined to call it marriage, then you call it marriage. That's fine. The husband married a husband. Okay, that ship has sailed. I don't think it makes any sense. Would have been nice if you could have come up with another word for it that meant the same thing. But okay, that's done. It didn't break my bones, and it didn't take anything out of my pocket. It annoyed me from a intellectual consistency point of view. But other than that, it's none of my business. I genuinely don't care. And I've had gay friends my entire life. I had a gay, not a roommate, I had a gay apartment mate for a year, I guess, when I was in Gainesville. Nice, super nice guy. I love watching football games. He didn't get into my business. I didn't get into his business. Worked out just great. But once they start overflowing the borders, it's like a river flooding, Once the river starts to overflow the banks, don't be pissed off if people start putting up sandbags to keep this channel where it belongs. And I don't find that to be hateful. It's the opposite of hateful. If somebody says, what do you think about gay people? It's like, well, give me some names. Because I've known some gay people who were absolutely horrific, miserable, drama queen, bitter, angry, obnoxious people. And I've also known some of the kindest, funniest, most talented, smartest people I've ever met. So give me some names. Thank you for the super chat, William Mills. You have proof of weapons that create hurricane. Okay. My problem with this, I did say I would mention this weather machine thing. I don't think people. My main issue with the weather machine is scale. Not a person here hasn't carried a bucket of water, right? Everybody's carried a bucket of water. We all know what water weighs. You look at a thunderstorm over Central Florida, let's say, and you think about the amount of rain that's going to come out of that storm, how many buckets it's going to fill. You have to stop. This happens to me as a pilot all the time. You have to stop and be amazed that storm is carrying that much weight. There's the weight of that water is, I don't know how many thousands of tons, but it's thousands of tons of water. Surely, water's pretty heavy stuff. So when you think about all the rain that comes out of that thunderstorm and goes into the buckets, if you had to haul all those buckets away, think about how much that water would weigh. Well, that water is up in the sky. Think about that. How is it in the sky? How is that possible? Well, it's possible because of all of the heat. And if you've ever tried to boil a pot of water, which most of us have had that experience, it's millions of tons, says Colonel Angus. I knew it, yeah. It seemed I didn't want to go too far but it certainly seems right. So a thunderstorm and its attendant clouds around it, millions of tons of water up in the air. And let's say you were to take bucket and bucket and bucket of that and heat it up enough to evaporate it, boil it. You've seen how much gas energy it takes to boil water. One bucket, not millions of buckets, one bucket. You've seen how long it takes for a gas stove to boil a bucket of water, and how long it takes not only to boil it, but to boil all of it in the bucket to evaporation. Okay? How much energy does it take to take a bucket of rainwater that you just came outside from, you just left it out there until it got filled up with rain, and there's, of course, that bucket is surrounded by infinite number of other buckets that are touching each other to count for the total amount of water. But you take one of those buckets, you put it on a gas stove, and you turn on the gas full heat. How long does it take to boil the water, and then how much longer does it take to boil away all of the water in that gallon bucket? It's a lot of BTUs, as Steve Whoop says. It's a lot of BTUs. And nobody understands the amount of energy it would take to put millions of tons of water into a water vapor state. I don't think there's that much energy produced in the United States. I think if you took all of the energy in the United States, I don't know if there'd be enough electrical energy in the United States to do that for one thunderstorm. And that's a thunderstorm. A hurricane is a spiral thunderstorm that covers hundreds of miles, hundreds of square miles in some cases. It just doesn't pass the physics test. And furthermore, I might add, when you are heating it up on a gas oven, you're in direct contact with a hot surface. This isn't. So you'd have to do it by microwaves. Now, you can make water hot with microwaves. As anybody who's put a cup of coffee or a cup of tea in a cup of hot water out of the microwave knows. You can get water hot with microwaves. But how much microwave energy would it take to raise millions of tons of water? And not just for one thunderstorm, to get all of this stuff lined up in such a way so that all of the other atmospheric pressures, no, it just doesn't pass the possibility test. Tranquility Base says it takes 8.33 BTUs, those would be British thermal units, to raise 1 gallon of water 1 degree Fahrenheit. 1 degree Fahrenheit. And Bucket 5 says, I was explaining that to a cowboy's convinced that these storms are made. Well, they're not made, and we're getting a little more crazy every day. This is going to get worse. This craziness is going to get worse. Right now, there's a technology that exists that could have a Stratosphere Lounge come on next Thursday and have it look exactly like me and sound exactly like me, and I could say the exact opposite of everything I've ever said. Everybody would leave and say, Bill, you've lost your marbles. You've completely gone around the bend, and you wouldn't know that it wasn't me doing the talking. So I believe that since soon we're already most of the way there, but pretty soon we'll be all the way there, you will not be able to believe anything that comes to you through this. This is not trustworthy. And what you're watching me on now is not trustworthy. This may not be me at all. I don't see any alternative to this as a society other than to return to personal contact and the value of a person's individual reputation. Now, if somebody tells me that they see an elephant flying through the sky, I'm generally going to disregard that as an hallucination. There are a small number of people, a very small number of people, who if they sat me down and said that they saw an elephant flying through the sky, I would listen to them with an open mind and have them convince me. Because those kind of people would be as amazed about an elephant flying through the sky as I am. But if they swore up and down that they saw it, those kind of people have the kind of honesty you say, my first thought and my overriding thought is that I've gone insane. That seems to be the most likely explanation for me seeing an elephant riding through the sky. But it did leave marks when it went through the trees, and there were 4 elephant pad footprints when it landed. So I took pictures of those, and they're still out in the field if you want to come see them. Now I have to start believing that either a friend who I trusted, who's always been nothing but honest their entire lives and nothing but sensible their entire lives, went to this gigantic hoax, or there's some phenomenon out there that I don't know about. I would give it the benefit of the doubt, at least as far as the telling of the story goes. But I think I'd probably like to see the actual elephant flying, to be perfectly honest with you. In fact, before I came completely convinced that it wasn't some kind of fraud joke or just a hallucination, I'd need to see the elephant flying too, at which point my first reaction would be, I must be insane too. That's the most likely explanation for a flying elephant. But it's not the only one. So could be something that we are not aware of yet. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Moving on. Jacob Belchak. Again, I'm going to skip it, Jacob. If you don't mind, my throat's getting a little sore, and I kind of need to move on a little bit here. Eli Noor. Do you consider the UN a relevant threat towards individualistic countries? No, I haven't believed the UN is a relevant anything since the mid-1960s. I just don't believe that they have any relevance at all. Thank you for that super chat, William Mills. They said it's not how they do it. They do have to have. It's not how they do it. I have proof. Oh, about the weather machine. Well, I am certainly interested in it, because if you have the ability to make those kind of changes in physics on that kind of scale, I would be very interested in seeing the proof. But more to the point, I think the proof would be something that you could present to. Well, first thing comes to mind is a congressional hearing on the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. Hi. We're okay, thanks. We're good. Have a good night. It's going to have to be some pretty good proof. Proof on that level would have to be the generation of weather in a controlled environment. I'm told to watch the video. Okay, well, I'll tell you one thing I have learned about videos, about documentaries. If you start off with essentially knowing nothing about a subject, and you put a bunch of points down on a line, you can make that line go in any direction you want it to, until you start hearing the rebuttals. So I've seen videos that made UFOs sound convincing, the moon landing sound convincing. I've seen videos that made extremely convincing case, to me anyway, that Shakespeare wasn't written by William Shakespeare, but rather by the 16th Earl of Oxford, and any number of other claims. I'm interested in. I really should watch the video, because I'm fairly sure that there is a number of assumptions that are in there, and catching them is the trick. Is where is the leap from A to C without going through B? Back to Eli Noor. Last month, the UN passed its Pact for the Future. Oh, good. Pact. That's what we need more of. Which includes several of the typical collectivist talking points: climate change, nuclear disarmament, international governance on AI, etc. Well, imagine if you were to have international government, who would benefit the most? I would imagine it'd be a member of the United Nations. So there's no conflict of interest there. A member of the world governing party that is absolutely irrelevant says, we need to make the world governing party all powerful. Wouldn't that be a great idea for everybody? I'm not convinced about that. Most concerning thing, in my opinion, was this statement: to mount an immediate and coordinated response to complex shocks. This would include a pandemic or any other circumstance they feel fits their vague definition. Yes. Coordinated response, coordinated by whom? In other words, if we're all going to put all of our disaster preparedness into one big giant blue box, who gets to control what's in the box? I'm getting the feeling the people who are writing this bill or this resolution are the ones who would be ending up with that power. I'd be shocked to discover that a multi-national agency would have thoughts like that. This would include a pandemic or any other circumstance that they feels their vague definition. I guarantee you a complex shock would be the immediate death of the planet, which is only hours away. One commentator I heard suggested this would give the UN Secretary General near dictatorial powers if the nations comply. Of course it would. This is especially concerning considering the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, served as Prime Minister of Portugal and was a member of the Portuguese Socialist Party. Thank God I'm sitting down when I read that. I would have fallen to the ground. I'd just gotten a case of the vapors and had fainted dead away to find out that he was a member of the Socialist Party. And all he wants to do is control the world? Wow, that's a one-off. Not trying to be conspiratorial, and I realize the UN can be a lot of political show theater. However, I find the shift towards globalism concerning. I don't. I find the United Nations is less relevant every day to the point where nobody even knows what it is anymore. Back after World War II, the United Nations had some moral credibility. And there was a period there where you would see science fiction movies, and it turns out that this is one of the weaknesses, I thought, one of the great weaknesses of The Expanse was, oh, the One Earth government under control of the United Nations. Yeah, that's going to work out real well. Just laziness, I thought. Just lazy writing. The Secretary General of the United Nations. Oh, okay. I couldn't have named him. I knew the first couple, but I didn't know Gutierrez was one. I didn't know anything about his background. But it's interesting that it comes from Portugal because, as the Simpsons say, there's going to be a soccer match to determine the greatest country in the world, Portugal or Mexico. No, it's just the Constitution is clear. There are countries that are so in love with bureaucracy. France comes to mind, that they would pony along and play along with this and sort of approve and applaud, and maybe they might even sign some documents, but the documents wouldn't be binding. They would say, we are committing all of our healthcare, our emergency resources to the care of the United Nations World Action Police. But when push comes to shove, they wouldn't do it. So look, the UN is not a threat because the UN has no enforcement capabilities. You know, if they owned all the nuclear weapons and all the tanks and the guns and the airplanes, then there'd be something to worry about. But they don't own any of those things. We have to lend them to them. And the Blue Helmets do not have the same level of reputation of boundless courage and initiative that, let's say, the United States Marines have. So the United Nations is a posturing organization. The short form about the United Nations was the mistaken belief that the United Nations would raise the rest of the world up to first world standards when all it has done is lower the first world down to third world standards. That's what the United Nations has done. When you have Iran and Korea and Cuba in charge of human rights commissions, you know, you've got a joke, you know. You could put the link in if you put the link to these weather control videos in the YouTube stream. I'll see if I can click on them and open up a tab. I'll give it I can give it a quick look at. Generally speaking, I'm not trying to bias your case, but when I hear these kind of things, like the case for UFOs or the case for 9/11 being an inside job or all the rest of it, I can usually, after 10 minutes, see where the chain of causality has broken in one or two places, and whether or not the perpetrators of that are doing it intentionally or not. Flat Earth comes to mind. All right. Broke college student. Hello, Bill. Hello, broke college student. As a quick aside regarding Jacob's question above, my wife and I have a Christian Orthodox couple as friends. The wife is unironically against the 19th Amendment. This was the second Jacob Belchuk question that I didn't take, is about the women's right to vote. I might as well just read this because it looks interesting. I probably took the wrong one. I saw a meme earlier. This was back to Jacob Belchuk because I can't do college students without this. I saw a meme earlier this week comparing men and women's chief political concerns for the upcoming election. Men were primarily concerned with economic conditions, but there was some distribution around immigration, war, and a few others. For women, the two overwhelming concerns were abortion and a fear of a right-wing government. You know, we had a right-wing government, and every single one of us who lived through the Trump years, our greatest regret is that we didn't completely get to pull off the handmaiden's tale the way we really wanted to. We were so close to using our guns to force women to run around barefoot and pregnant, do nothing but bake cookies in the kitchen. This is a neurotic fantasy, this right-wing government. I'll get to the rest of the question in a minute. But these women who say if you vote for Trump, you're going to bring around this Christian theocracy that's going to force us all back to the kitchen, and we won't have the right to vote or any of these other things. And it's like, well, I didn't say it was an entirely bad idea. It's a neurotic fantasy. It's an unreasonable fear that excites them. It titillates their emotional, neurotic need for perpetual drama. Put very harshly, after 100 years of having the right to vote, the primary concern of over half of the electorate is the ability to kill their own children, and the secondary concern is that they might live in a society that values and promotes merit and accountability. If you remove the female vote from the electorate, the left never wins again. Not only never wins again, it just doesn't even exist at that point. What do you think can be done about this? Well, this is what we're going to find out in terms of November. If let me finish up here. Was the 19th Amendment a mistake? No. I think the 19th Amendment should have been written so that women should get 3/5 of a vote. I'll just let that sit out there long enough for somebody to pick it up and run with it. No, obviously, adult humans have a right to determine their own future, but there has been an awful lot of damage caused by people voting based on emotions rather than on a look at reality, because politics is about where people intersect with reality. What can you think can be done about this? Was the 19th Amendment a mistake? No, it was not a mistake. I keep seeing memes from young men talking about how they'll be sent to die in Ukraine or Israel because a bunch of women wanted to kill their kids, and that carries a grim, fatalistic truth to it, I think. Please disabuse me of these creeping fingers of sexism if you can. Look, it's real. The brides of the state, the bots, the single white liberal women are the largest single voting group in the country, and they vote 3-1 Democrat. You take them out of the equation, just marry them, and the country never gets a Democratic president again. Just marry them. Do I still have that chart that I used? I think I do. Hang on. Is it this one? Nope. It might be. Yeah. Here, have a look at this. Okay, don't have a look at that. Have a look at this. I don't know if this was Monday's show or last Thursday's show. Here's some facts from a Pew Research poll that was done in 2020. Things have gotten much, much worse since then. So basically, if you look at these three categories, what you find is the question is, has a doctor or healthcare provider ever told you that you have a mental health condition? Now, this is the percentage saying yes. Now, remember, for a doctor to ask you, have you a general practitioner doctor? Because if you're going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you've already answered the question. This is has a medical doctor, in the course of treating you for your heartburn or your achy elbows or whatever, have they ever told you that you might have a mental health condition? The number of people saying yes, you can see the lines for the men and for the women. There's a lot of data in these lines, so let's just look at the lower left-hand corner. We just want to go through this again because it bears exactly on what we were just talking about. Let's look at the lower left-hand corner for the blue line marked men. Okay, on the far left of the line below that, you see 18 to 29. Those are the ages, and that looks something like 15% of men aged 18 to 29 have been told by a doctor at least once in their life that you might have a mental health condition. If you come to the 30 to 49 bracket, it's less than 10%. If you go to the 65 plus bracket, it's 7%? And what's interesting is that the women who start out more neurotic at 20%, with the men at 15%, the older they get, the more they converge. In other words, by the time, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner now with women and men, 65-year-old women are just as sane as 65-year-old men. They've had time for life to beat the stupid out of them. Those are conservatives. Moderates have significantly higher neuroses levels, as determined by the question, than conservatives do. And liberals have vastly more neurotic tendencies than conservatives do. If you look at the right-hand column with liberals, you find that 18 to 29% men are 30% likely, as opposed to 15. So they're twice as likely as conservative men. Young conservative liberals are young conservative liberal men are twice as likely as young conservative men. One more time. Young liberal men are twice as likely as young conservative men to have been told they have a mental health condition. Young liberal women are 2.5 times more likely to say that they've had a mental health condition, and that number in the upper right-hand corner exceeds 50%. And again, that's not the number of people that have it. That's the number of people that have been told by medical doctors that they have it or might have it. The actual numbers are considerably higher than this. So what this is basically saying is, on one end of the scale between men and women, liberal and conservatives, 15% of young men are crazy. 15% of conservative young men are crazy, while 54% of liberal young women are crazy. It's a significant, big step. And even in liberals, as you get older, the craziness decreases. Now, understand, that's not measuring people who are crazy now. That's just saying that older liberals are a lot less crazy than younger liberals. Younger liberal women are 54% crazy. Older liberal women are 15% crazy. They get a lot less crazy, not as they get older. It's not measuring what happens to them as they get older. It's saying older liberals are less crazy than younger liberals. They're significantly less crazy than younger liberals. So it's, it is what it is. As far as the right to vote goes, I've said this before and I will say it again, because I mean this from the bottom of my heart. if things really were to go belly up and I were to drive to Idaho or Texas or Florida even, I'd have a better case with Florida because I was a former resident there for 25 years. But if I basically stood at a barricaded border of a red state and I said, please, please, please let me in, one of the conditions of my entry would be, I promise I will not vote. I agree that I will not vote ever again for the course of my life. Even though I'm a conservative, you have no way of trusting me. I've got California tags on my car. If you say I don't get to vote for the rest of my life, works for me. Works for me. So there it is. If women say the greatest threat is their abortion, their ability to have abortions, and being bulldozed over by a non-existent right-wing conspiracy, then one of them is not only an emotional reaction, but it's an anti-emotional reaction. It is a reaction that has been intellectually inserted into young women's minds that overrides their most fundamental instincts, which is to protect their children. They have been so brainwashed that they've not only overriding some of their natural inclinations, they're overriding. They're making a religion of overriding their primary biological imperative. And this is the same kind of thing for what they do to men. What liberals do to men is they basically tell men, any thoughts you have as a man, you must eliminate. You simply must eliminate. You can't be strong, you can't be independent, you can't be any of these things because that's toxic masculinity, which is very, very bad. Toxic masculinity, very bad. Got to get rid of it. Unless there's a spider in the bathtub, in which case we will make short, very limited allowances for toxic masculinity for the, write them a 2-minute pass or whatever amount of time it takes for somebody to go in there and take care of that. But no, they're nuts. They're nuts. Here's a super chat from, Fostonia. Just marry liberal women. That's crazy, Bill. You do that and you'll be the one who's the stay-at-home dad while she is becoming boss babe. No thanks. Love your videos with Daily Wire, by the way. Thank you. This is why men are going their own way. MGTOW, men going their own way. They don't like the deal. It's not a deal anymore. These women want they've been told that they can be as promiscuous as men and have no consequences on their lives. Well, it's just not true. If you've had 50 sexual partners and you decide to marry number 51 and settle down with them, you will be comparing number 51 with number 13, who was just incredible in bed, and number 22, who was funny as hell, and number 11, who was, an athlete and had, the body of an Adonis and all the rest of it. And you'll be miserably unhappy. You'll file for divorce like 80% of the divorces are filed for by women. When it comes to university-educated couples, it's 90% of divorces are initiated by women, and many of them go out into the dating market going after the chads. They've been told that they're boss babes, they can live their own life, it's all about their happiness, they deserve to be loved the way they want to be loved. They ditch marriages that are 10 years old, 20 years old, split the family, lose the kids, go out there, have themselves a fine little month or two with Chad, then Chad moves on because he's not interested in secondhand goods, and then they're all alone and they wonder why the hell they're talking to their cats on Christmas. So yeah, it's a crummy deal for men. And the courts are designed to take away men's assets and give them to women, even if they've been married for a relatively short time. So men's risk is all of my capital, half of my capital, and my children taken away from me by the government, not because I cheated, not because I was abusive or physical, but because my wife got bored and decided she could do better. And so, yeah, I think I'll sit this one out. And the women are so entitled and they're so obnoxious and aggressive, and this is why I keep watching these body cam videos, because I cannot believe how violent and emotionally stunted modern American women, modern Western women are, I just can't believe my eyes. And they're banging their heads against the back of the police cruisers, and they're intentionally peeing on the seats, and they're kicking the windows out, and they're just having conniption fits because nobody ever told Daddy's Little Princess no before. They're unanchored. They have nothing. Modern feminism has given women nothing that women need. It's given them nothing that they need. It's given them some things that they want, but it's given them nothing that they need. And so they're miserable. And you saw the chart, and they're getting more miserable every day. And as they get older, and they start to realize that they can't undo a body count of 75, and that no man on earth who's worth marrying wants to marry a woman who's had 150 partners prior to him. You can't unscrew those guys. Can't do it. And they find this terribly unfair, and they're very angry. In fact, them being very angry is about the one consistent quality that you can count on them all having, and that is that they're very, 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 very angry. And there have been calls to legislate against passport bros, make it illegal for men to go overseas looking for wives. I didn't go looking for my wife overseas, but I did marry a woman who's an actual woman from Russia who does not have any of these Western pathologies. And they're trying to, there are some women who want to legislate this, to ban the sale of video games because guys would rather just, have some bedroom fun and then go play Call of Duty with the boys. I'll text you Thursday night at midnight, see if you're doing anything. You can come over for an hour or two. That's the world that feminism has given them. That's the world that's the world that they've been told they wanted, and they took to it. By the way, anytime you hear a stand-up comedy and you hear a comedian say something like, well, today's National Women's Day, and there's this big cheer among the crowd from all the women, or, oh, women are much smarter than men, and all the women cheer, 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 and the men are completely silent. Why do you think that is? The same reason the contrast Christianity and Islam that I did at the beginning of this program. It's because if you have to cheer for yourself out loud, you're fundamentally insecure about yourself. If you can sit there quietly while other people criticize you, it's because you have self-confidence. Women are much smarter than men. Woo! Does that hurt our feelings? No. Because we just know it's just plain not true. It's just not true. Oh, we're going to have our first woman president. Woo! The men are sitting there going, is she any good? Does she know what she's doing? They're not cheering for a person. They're cheering for a gender. They're cheering for an idea. And so if Kamala Harris wins the election, I will be sad for my country, but I will be happy that this will be the end of DEI and the end of feminism, because they will have elected the stupidest and the most frightened person ever to sit in the Oval Office. And things are going to get, and all of those communist collectivist ideas come along as well. So when she starts taxing people and wondering why the economy continues to shut down and why inflation increases and unemployment goes up, and then when Russia threatens us or threatens our allies or territories or whatever, or China or whatever, and we don't do anything, and then we start to get ourselves in real trouble, and ISIS grows again and all the rest of it. When all this stuff happens, terrorist attacks in the U.S., all of this, then people will come to realize this is what you asked for, this is what you voted for, this is what you get. Go back to the ghost town that you came from. unboard the closed up offices at San Francisco, hire a sheriff. We recommend a male for this job. A strong male with integrity would be even better. Enforce the law and go back and live in your beautiful coastal cities. But don't come out here where we know right from wrong and tell us how to run our lives, because we've already seen you screw up not just your campfire, you've screwed up our campfire. Had enough of it. So then now to Brooke College student. Aside regarding Jacob's question above, my wife and I have a Christian Orthodox couple as friends. The wife is unironically against the 19th Amendment. Women are more emotional than men are. And if you don't know that, then you haven't met many of them, men or women. And the problem with emotion is that emotion can lead you away from reality. And when you wake up in the morning, you may end up feeling better or worse, but reality feels exactly the same. And that's why reality wins every time. Moving on to the question here. That's it, okay. A quick aside okay. A couple of months ago, Andrew Klavan had on some less mainstream young rightish figures trying to understand their positions. This was an attempt to see where the political right is trending as a replacement for the politics of conservative boomers. These were relatively small creations, including Pearl Davis and Jay Burden. Burden, among many others, including Aaron McIntyre over at The Blaze, have been labeled as a dissident right, with many thoughts disagreeing with the more mainstream crowd like the DW people. Some of their arguments, as I understand them, include, so these would be arguments that young right-wingers are apparently showing. Neutral institutions are impossible and a lie. Solid point could be made for that. The sanctification of the Constitution is a mistake. It's a tool, not the Bible. Well, it's not the Bible, but it's the next best thing. And it is also a tool, but it is an unparalleled tool of distinction, and so any attempt to change it is only going to make it worse. That's why you sanctify it. You sanctify it because experience has shown that every time we get away from the Constitution, things get worse. When we listen to the Constitution and do what it tells us, or rather the government does what it tells it to do, we all live a much happier life. So yes, I think it's worthy of sanctification. It's worthy of sanctification because it's passed the test of time and trial and error, and the evidence that it knows what it's doing is overwhelming. So to say that it's just a tool, meaning you could replace it with something else, you better take that replacement tool out for a long and thorough test drive before I'm even interested in having a conversation. Conservatives are terrible at power politics. Correct. But we don't want to be good at power politics because power politics is what we're against in the first place. No question conservatives are terrible at power politics. And it looks like we're going to have to get better at power politics and pray to God that we can get better at power politics so we can restore some balance to the situation so we don't have to have power politics at all. Other forms of government are more stable, such as a monarchy. Who wants stability? Stability is stagnation. I want nothing but, I don't want constant change. I want constant ability to change. I want millions of new ideas bubbling up all the time that can be tested against things like the Constitution and common sense to see which new ideas are worth implementing. Some of them are worth implementing. The vast majority are not. But stability is not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is freedom. You say a monarchy is stable. Dictatorship is stable too. A monarchy, modern monarchies are of course very benign, but monarchies are the ultimate form of dictatorship. The divine right of kings. I've got the right to tell you what to do because of how I was born versus how you were born. That's not a feature, that's a bug. Freedom of similar ethnic preference is derided one way. That is separate from ethnic bigotry. Freedom of association is dead. Yes, freedom of similar ethnic preference is derided one way. Correct, yes. You can have an all-black dorm, but you can't have an all-white dorm. That's separate from ethnic bigotry, yes. Well, maybe. Not sure about that part. But freedom of association is dead. I certainly agree it's dead on college campuses. The moral mythology of World War II is used as a cudgel to prevent any European policies from forming self-solidarity and voting in their interest. That's when you're going to have to explain. Hitler caused the Holocaust. To Germans caused it. The European Court on Human Rights, advocated for by Churchill after World War II, meant to help Jews fleeing Germany, being used to prevent Muslim rapists from being deported from Britain. Well, that is clear and concise. This sounds to me like an anti-Semitic argument. The moral mythology of World War II is used as a cudgel to prevent any European policies from forming self-solidarity and voting in their interest. In other words, the Holocaust is used to prevent, let's say, white solidarity and voting in their interest. Hitler caused the Holocaust to Germans, caused it. That must be a misprint. The European Court on Human Rights, advocated for by Churchill. Not entirely sure it was an advocate of that, but I'd like to see the source for that. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I'd like to see that one sourced. After World War II was meant to help Jews fleeing Germany is being used to prevent Muslim rapists from being deported from Britain. I'm not sure this is directly connected to the European Court on Human Rights, although I'm sure they use that as the justification. But yes, the Europeans are suffering. Western Europeans are suffering from, still suffering from suicidal guilt as a result of the Nazi regime. The left-wing intellectuals are suffering from suicidal guilt about it. They'll never get over it, and they won't get over it till they die. Yes, it's guilt that stops them from deporting Muslim rapists. In Oslo, I forget what the years were, and I'm sure the streak is longer, although it may not be an uninterrupted streak, but back in somewhere around 2015 or something, somebody said that the number of rapes in Oslo, Norway, that were committed by immigrant Muslims, that the percentage of rapes in Oslo or Norway over a 5-year period committed by immigrant Muslims, the percentage was 100%. 100%. That's data. That's not opinion. That's not bigotry. That's data. Swedish girls used to walk around in miniskirts. They don't do that anymore because it's not safe in their own country. And it's not safe in their own country because of these savages that they've imported out of a feeling of guilt. And the liberal politicians that run these countries would rather have their own women raped than face the fact that some of these people that they brought in, not all of them, but a significant enough percentage of them to have generated statistics like the one I just mentioned, is secondary to them feeling some sense of relief for their terminal sense of guilt. We owe them nothing. You could make a case, if since you're talking about European history, you could make a case that Europe owes the Jews something, but there's not only no case to be made that Europe owes the people who killed Jews something. See, I think that's a big part of what it is. I think one of the reasons that Western European intellectuals are fine with Muslims coming in and raping people, including themselves and their children, is because it's clear that these Muslims hate Jews and want to kill them. And I think that releases them from the onus of being the people that did all the killing during World War II in terms of the Nazis. That was done by white Western Europeans. That when I was doing the Empire of Terror, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of books about why is it that Nazism is so abhorred and no one ever would be seen walking down the streets with a swastika on a college campus, let's say, but you will often see people wearing the hammer and sickle on a college campus. The hammer and sickles killed 20, well, anywhere from 5 to 20 times as many people as the swastika did. So how come the hammer and sickle is okay, but the swastika isn't? Well, it's because even though they killed more people out in the gulags, there was no video of this. There's no record of this. There's no gas chambers to go visit. There's a couple of wooden shacks that are breaking themselves to pieces against the Arctic winter that are still left at places like Kolyma. But there's no picture it didn't happen, right? It's a picture it didn't happen. So there is no. One of these authors talking about this difference between the way we perceive the Soviets and the Nazis said that on some supernatural level we perceive Nazism as an evil without redemption, and that it is a stain on humanity, history. And I think that's basically it. I think that's it. It was so mechanized and so appalling and so here. See, if something happens in Russia, you send somebody out to Siberia. They're on the other side of the planet. They're damn near on the other side of the planet from Europe. Now, this stuff happened in Germany. Well, didn't happen in Germany. They were sent from Germany and all of the nations that the Nazis conquered. And virtually all of the killing happened in Poland. Including an awful lot of Poles. So I think these modern right-wingers need a little history buff. Many of the things they're saying are true. I think their causes are a little confused on some of these things. I'd like to talk with them about that and see what they have to say. There are more, and I'm not the originator of the arguments, so these may be inaccurate or missing needed context. What are your boundaries on right-wing discourse and open solidarity? My boundaries are, I'm a three laws conservative libertarian, but since these require laws, that kind of takes me out of the pure libertarian camp. I believe that we need to have 3 coercive laws in this society of ours. Just 3 is all we need, and everything else is just a lawyer interpreting whether you broke one of these 3 laws. Don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, and do what you promised to do. And anybody who goes beyond those boundaries, in my definition of what conservatism is on the periphery. Don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, do what you promised to do. The first 2 are criminal law, the third one is civil law, tort law. That's all you need. It's all you need. You can't think of a crime. You can't think of a crime that couldn't be prosecuted under one of those 3 laws. Don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, and do what you promised to do. It's so simple, there's nothing to add to it. Nothing needs to be added to it. You can start saying, well, this, or what about this, or what about that? Yeah, well, Roadrunner, I use slightly different language, but basically, you could boil the 3 laws down to 1 law, and that is don't be a dick. Just don't be a dick, period. Do what you want, don't be a dick. That's all. That's it. That's what a free society is. Don't be a dick. But don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, and do what you promise you're going to do. That's all you need. And I would like to see the next generation of conservatives really understand that in their bones. So, there you go. Right now, P7 2017 says, right now you're illustrating why there's such resistance to simplifying criminal and civil code. And Wing T Production says this sounds like Stefan Molyneux. Well, I agree with Stefan on a lot of things. If you had those 3 laws, you'd be golden. And you could, and you want to deal with how do you fund the government? Okay, take 10% of everything I spend, because I get a decision on what I spend. I make my money. My money is my money. I get paid for the work that I do. It belongs to me, all of it. It doesn't belong to the government. Something has to run a government, so take 10% of what I spend. And that's your budget. And if you can't live on that, then you need to cut back. What you really need to do is you need to incentivize us all to spend more by making better things at lower prices. So if you really want to increase your revenue so that you have money to play with, you government fiends, take 10% of everything I spend. It's a nice, simple agreement. If you personally want to take another 10% for tithing or other charities, then God bless you. But that is voluntary, because if it's coercive, then it's not charity, it's theft. So, there you go. Eric Blake. Due to a lack of electric or internet at the office, the man with the hat's chilling outside a gas station to charge up his resources in more ways than one. So, Bill, your point on the worst case scenario actually feeds a thought I've had for a bit. As you recall, I got a big kick out of the happenstance on Election Day this year falling on the 5th of November. Remember? Yes, that's the gunpowder plot day, Guy Fawkes Day. In this case, I found it darkly funny when I learned the name of the giant menacing hurricane gunning for Florida just happened to be named for the author of Paradise Lost, Hurricane Milton. So both probable coincidences got me mulling over matters of omens and fate. I don't believe in omens and fate, but I'm willing to entertain any reasonable discussion. Of course, Florida is far from lost, as old Milton seriously toned it down by the time it actually hit. So what do you think? Are omens like the 5th of November to be taken seriously? And if so, to what extent? Or is it just the Almighty having a dark sense of humor? Well, he's having a dark sense of humor, and it's a pretty inside joke, Eric. You're one of, I don't know, you may be the only person that I know. I know other people who know some things that you don't know, but you may be the only person I know that caught that November 5th is Guy Fawkes Day, is the day of the hurricane, of the gunpowder plot. So if this is God having his joke, then he let you in on it and very few other people. And the same thing goes for Milton. You have to be a fairly well-read, educated individual to get any reference to either Milton or Guy Fawkes, which is a good sign for you and something to be proud of. But I don't consider these to be cosmic, it's not like Comet Kamala appeared in the skies over heaven. It's a fairly obscure reference, frankly. So we'll see. A couple of, I always like to deal with these. Hang on a second. Superstition is a bad omen, says Beefire. You're right. It's bad luck to be superstitious. Here's our first time chat from Guladano, I hope. Wait, so monopolies and super low quality products and services are bad, LOL? Yes, LOL. They are bad. Monopolies reduce competition and they reduce innovation. And they provide stability, which I don't like. So, Milton Friedman is a good Milton. Absolutely right. Okay, so that's all of our questions, and I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm feeling a little sore in the throat here. I've got a show I have to post that I've been delaying, and I'm got this kind of itch reaction. It's probably just nerves. So anyway, I think we'll probably just wrap this up. I had fun doing little quizzes in the last couple days, naming the 50 states. That's not a terribly tough one, especially if you have a map. I only had 12 minutes to do it. I got about half of the countries in the world, and of the ones that I didn't get. I recognized most of them, but I never would have gotten all of them. I got Tonga. I did the constellations test, which I talk about being a fun thing to do. I got precisely 50% of the constellations. I got 44 out of 88 in 12 minutes. I feel like I could have done better than that. When I saw the names of all the constellations I missed, if I were to go back and do it now, I think I'd probably get 75%. So anyway, yeah, that'll do it. I definitely feel my throat starting to get a little sore here, so I might just head on home and come in early. I've been threatening to do that forever, but it's about time I actually did it. Yeah, this itch is, it's just nerves is what it is. Okay. Yeah, I think that'll do it. The show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. Thank you so much for the kind words in both chat sections. It's always a pleasure to hear. I've decided, just for giggles, try something new. This time when I turn off the YouTube chat and go to the close screen, see what I usually do is I go to the close screen, which cuts the audio and puts up the Stratosphere Lounge banner, or in the case of Monday, the Stratosphere Studio banner. And I leave that open for a while because the second I close down the stream, it just shuts down the comments, and usually people are like saying goodbye to each other in the comments or adding a couple of other things. And so last time I decided to leave that chat stream open for about 16 hours, I think it was, which is probably enough time for people who've said goodbye. So I think to avoid doing that in the future, YouTube, I'm going to have to just slam the door on people's faces, which I generally don't like doing. But this isn't the first time I forgot to turn the thing off because I wanted to leave a little time for the room to cool down. So that's what we're going to do. Again, thanks to the members for making this possible. We'll see you Monday night on the Stratosphere Lounge. Talking to you out there at YouTube now. Be prepared to say goodbye because we're going to make the room go ba-boom. Ready? Okay. Brace yourselves. Eject, eject, eject.